When I woke up from that surgery I never asked for, I looked in the mirror and saw a dead woman's face staring back at me. My husband had transformed me into his deceased wife. What I did to his face after was the only thing I had left to do. Hi, my dear ones. How wonderful it is to be here with you again. Go ahead and get comfortable. Grab yourself a cup of coffee, because today's story, this one is going to touch your hearts. My name is Evelyn Mae Parker, but everyone here in Cedar Falls, Iowa, just calls me Grandma Evie. I'm 78 years old, honey, and let me tell you, each one of those years has a story to tell. Today I'm here in my kitchen, with this table full of fudge, caramels, and chocolate truffles that I make to sell at the farmer's market every Saturday. The smell of melted chocolate and cream is filling the whole house, you know? It's a scent that soothes the soul. I started making these sweets about 15 years ago, after I retired from my job as an office assistant. At first, it was just to keep myself busy. You know how it is? You're alone at home, the kids are all grown up, the grandkids caught up in the rush of modern life. So I thought, Evie, you need to do something useful with these hands. And that's how this little business was born. Every Saturday morning, bright and early, I set up my booth at the downtown farmer's market right in the center of town. My customers know me. They know that Grandma Evie's sweets are made with love and care. I'm here wrapped in my floral apron, wooden spoon in hand, stirring this pot on low heat so it doesn't burn. I learned to make sweets from my mother, back on the farm where I grew up, but I'll tell you about that in a bit. What's important now is for you to know that it's here, in this simple but clean kitchen, that I find my peace. Here between these yellow walls, with my old but reliable gas stove, with my colorful molds all lined up on the Formica table. And you, my dear ones watching me now, I want to ask you something special. Tell me in the comments, what corner of the country are you watching from? And tell me, what time of day did you find this grandma's video? Is it morning with your coffee? Lunch break? Resting a bit? Or is it evening, after work? I read all the comments, you know? It makes me so happy to know where you're from and what moment of the day you set aside to listen to this old lady's stories. Do this for me, okay? Let's create a chain of kindness. Oh, and if you like my story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell because I still have so much to tell. Life has taught this grandma a lot, and each lesson might help someone who needs to hear it. But you know, my loves, there's something I need to tell you today. A story I've kept for many years that only now, in my old age, do I have the courage to share. It's a story about when I was young, about a love that seemed like a fairy tale, but turned into the worst nightmare anyone could imagine. It's about the day I woke up and didn't recognize my own face in the mirror. It's about a man who loved me in such a sick, wrong way that he almost destroyed who I was inside. But before I get into that difficult part, let me tell you how it all started, back in my childhood, when I was just a dreamy little girl running barefoot through the fields of Cedar Falls. I was born right here in Cedar Falls, but not in town, honey. It was on a farm about 12 miles from downtown, in a little house that my father built with his own hands. My father's name was Oliver Parker, a strong man with calloused hands who worked from sunrise to sunset on wheat and corn crops. My mother was Grace, a small woman, but with a strength you can't imagine. She took care of the house, the children, the vegetable garden, the chickens, made butter, made bread, made everything a family of 7 needed. That's right, there were 7 of us kids. I was the third, right in the middle. The oldest were my siblings Arthur and Teresa. After me came Donald, Nancy, Zelda, and the youngest William. The house was small, only had 3 bedrooms, so we girls all slept in one room, in 2 iron beds that creaked all night when someone moved. The boys stayed in another room, and my parents in the third. The house had wooden plank floors that my mother washed every Saturday with water and lye soap she made herself. The smell of that homemade soap, mixed with hot water, oh my God, was a scent of cleanliness I've never smelled the same since. The kitchen was the heart of the house, with a big wood-burning stove where my mother spent all day. There was a long wooden table where we all sat for meals, always at the same time, always together. My father insisted on that. I remember we'd wake up with the rooster's crow before the sun even rose. My father was already up, preparing things for the field. We children had our chores. The girls helped mother with the house and the yard animals. I loved taking care of the chickens, throwing corn to them early in the morning, looking for eggs in the nests. There was a speckled hen that was my favorite. I even named her, called her Precious. She followed me around the yard like a little dog. The boys went with my father to the fields, but only when they got older. Arthur started working in the field at about 10 years old. My father would say, "A man has to learn to earn his bread by the sweat of his brow from an early age." But with us girls, he was more protective. He didn't want us getting too much sun or doing heavy work. "Girls need to study, need to be different," he'd say. Ah, school. It was a simple rural schoolhouse, just one room with old wooden desks and a teacher named Miss Hortense. To get there, my siblings and I walked 2 miles on foot every day. In winter, when it was freezing cold on the Iowa prairie, we'd go bundled up in wool coats my mother sewed. In summer, we'd go in sandals, with the sun beating down on our heads. But it was good, you know. We'd go talking, playing along the way, picking wild berries when they were in season, stopping to watch birds. I really liked studying. I was a good student. The teacher always praised my beautiful handwriting and reading. I dreamed of continuing my education, going to high school in town, maybe even becoming a teacher someday. My mother supported this dream. She'd say, "Evie, you're smart. You're not going to stay just on the farm like I did." But it was hard, right? Big family, little money, and back then it wasn't common for country girls to study much. Sunday afternoons were the best. After lunch, which was always special, my father would butcher a chicken, my mother would make roasted chicken or a well-seasoned stew. We had free time. My sisters and I would play with rag dolls that my mother sewed for us. We'd play house under the big oak tree in the yard. The boys played ball with a homemade ball in a little field they made themselves, or flew kites when it was windy. There were also community gatherings. Every month there was a dance in Mr. Juvenal's barn, a neighbor who lived about a mile away. Everyone went, whole families. There was accordion, guitar, and the adults danced square dances and waltzes. We kids would run around playing tag, eating pie, and drinking lemonade. My mother made apple cakes to bring, and everyone complimented them. She was known in the area for her baking. I inherited this gift for cooking from her. My father was a serious man, hard-working, but affectionate in his way. He wasn't much for conversation or hugs, but he showed his love by taking care of us, bringing food home, scolding when necessary, but always fairly. My mother was the opposite. She was pure affection. She sang while she worked, always had a smile on her face, even when she was tired. At night, before bed, she'd come say goodnight to each of us, say a prayer, give a kiss on the forehead. I was about 8 years old when I got my first new dress, made especially for me. Before that, I only wore clothes that were Teresa's hand-me-downs that were too big. But that year, my mother managed to buy some blue floral fabric in town and sewed a dress just for me. I felt like the prettiest girl in the world in that dress. I wore it to Easter Mass at the community chapel, and I remember walking all stiff, afraid of getting it dirty. When I was about 10 years old, a truck started coming to the property occasionally, bringing supplies my father bought in town. The driver was an old man named Mr. Ignatius, and he always brought old newspapers for us. I loved reading those newspapers, even if the news was old. I'd see photos of beautiful ladies, read about the big cities, about New York, about Chicago. I'd imagine what it would be like to live in a big city, have electricity, running water, all those modern things we only heard about. But life on the farm was good. It was simple, but it was honest. We didn't have luxury, but we had food on the table every day. We had a united family. We had health. I was a happy girl, a dreamer, full of plans for the future. I loved sitting under that oak tree on summer afternoons with a book the teacher lent me, reading stories of distant places. That's how I spent my entire childhood, between studies, household chores, playing with my siblings, Sundays at gatherings. I didn't know yet, but life was storing paths for me that I never imagined. When I turned 12, my father started talking about sending me to study in town, to live with an aunt of his who didn't have children. "Evie's got a knack for learning," he'd say. And that's how, at 13, I left the protection of that wooden house for the first time and went to live in the big city. The move to town was a huge shock for me, my dears. I, who only knew the sound of birds and the silence of the countryside, was suddenly in the middle of the hustle and bustle of Cedar Falls, with cars passing, people everywhere, horns, noise. I went to live with Aunt Diana, my father's sister, in a simple but tidy little house near downtown. She was a widow, had no children, and agreed to take me in so I could study at Cedar Falls High School nearby. The first few months were difficult. I missed my mother, my siblings, that good chaos of a full house. Aunt Diana was a good woman, but kind of dry, you know, not very affectionate. She treated me well, gave me food, made me study, but didn't have that warmth I was used to. At night, I'd cry hidden in my pillow, homesick. But I was stubborn, really wanted to study, so I got used to it. At school, I made friends, started fitting in. There was a classmate named Eunice who became my best friend. We studied together, went to the park after school, talked about the boys we thought were cute. Teenager stuff, right? I finished high school with good grades at 17. My father was proud, came to graduation with my mother, all dressed up in a borrowed suit. It was such a happy day. But then came the difficult decision: continue studying or work. The family needed help, and I was grown up. I ended up getting a job as an office assistant at a fabric store downtown. The pay was small, but it helped pay for my stay at Aunt Diana's house, and I still sent some money home. The years went by. I worked during the day, helped my aunt at home, and on weekends went to the farm to visit family. I had some youthful romances, nothing serious. A guy from accounting took me to the movies once. Another gave me some kisses at the community center dance, but nothing went anywhere. I was still kind of shy, kind of reserved about dating. Everything changed when I was 24 years old. I had already left Aunt Diana's house and was living in a rented room near work. I was no longer that country girl. I was an independent woman, earning my money, paying my bills. At that time, I changed jobs. I went to work as a receptionist at a medical clinic that had just opened downtown. It was a modern clinic, beautiful, all white and clean-smelling. I wore a white uniform, stayed at reception greeting patients, scheduling appointments, organizing files. That's where I met him, Dr. Harold Thatcher, a plastic surgeon who had come from Des Moines to open a practice in Cedar Falls. He was a man in his mid-40s, very elegant, always in an impeccable suit, expensive cologne, hair styled with pomade. Tall, handsome build, fine hands of someone who never worked on a farm. He was a widower. Everyone knew that. His wife had died in a car accident about 5 years earlier, according to what the nurses said. At first, he barely spoke to me, just greeted with a nod when he arrived in the morning and when he left in the afternoon. I stayed there at reception. He went straight to his office. But over time, he started making conversation. He'd ask how my day was, if I was enjoying the job, where I was from. I'd answer politely, but without much familiarity, right? After all, he was the doctor, the boss, and I was just the receptionist. One day he called me to his office after everyone had left. My heart beat fast. I thought I had done something wrong, but he just wanted to talk. He asked about my family, about my life. I told him about the farm, my parents, my siblings. He listened attentively, with those light eyes fixed on me. At the end, he said, "You're a very special young woman, Evelyn. You have a purity you don't see anymore these days." After that, the conversations became more frequent. He started asking me for coffee after work. He'd take me to fancy restaurants I'd never set foot in. I felt awkward, didn't know which fork to use, which glass was for which drink. But he was patient, taught everything gently. "You have natural class," he'd say. "Just need a little polishing." In 3 months, he officially asked me to be his girlfriend. I didn't know what to answer. He was much older, much richer, from a completely different world. But he was kind, affectionate, treated me like a princess. And I was starting to fall in love. He gave me expensive gifts, took me to beautiful places, made me feel special. For the first time in my life, I felt important to someone who wasn't my family. I told my parents. My father was suspicious. "That man is too old for you, Evie, and too rich. People like that don't marry people like us." But my mother, poor thing, thought it was beautiful. "If he treats you well, daughter, and you like him, then it's good." The courtship lasted 6 months, and it was during this period that strange things started happening. But I was so enchanted that I didn't see the danger. He started giving me clothes as gifts, beautiful, expensive dresses, but old-fashioned, styles that nobody wore anymore, like from the 40s, 50s. I thought it was strange, but he'd say, "It's a classic style, elegant. Modern fashion is vulgar." I wore them to please him. Then he started with the hair. I'd always been brunette, dark brown hair, straight. He'd look at my hair and sigh. One day he said, "Have you ever thought about dyeing it blonde? I think it would look beautiful on you." I laughed, said it wasn't my style. But he insisted, always bringing it up. "Just to try, love. For me. I've always found blonde women so beautiful." There was also that painting. In his house, a beautiful mansion in the Heights, there was a huge painting in the living room. The portrait of a blonde woman, beautiful, in an old-fashioned dress, gentle smile. It was Claire, his deceased wife. Whenever I went there, I felt those painted eyes following me. He sometimes stood staring at that painting for minutes, as if in a trance. I'd try to get his attention, but it was like he couldn't hear me. One night I asked, "You still love her very much, don't you?" He looked at me with a strange, almost frightening expression. "True love never dies, Evelyn. It just transforms, finds new paths." I didn't understand what he meant, but those words gave me chills. Even so, when he proposed to me on my 25th birthday, I accepted. He knelt with a huge diamond ring, called me my salvation, and I said yes. My mother cried with joy. My father was silent. Eunice, my friend, pulled me aside and said, "Evie, are you sure? This man? He's strange. Claire died under suspicious circumstances, you know? Some people say he was in the car with her." I didn't want to listen. I thought it was jealousy, small-town gossip. We got married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the Methodist church. Me in white, him in black. When I put on the wedding dress he had custom made, I noticed it was too old-fashioned, full of lace, long sleeves, high collar. It looked like a dress from another era. But everyone complimented it, said I was beautiful, so I swallowed the strangeness. The honeymoon was in Chicago, at a fancy hotel. It was there that he gave me another gift, a box of platinum blonde hair dye. "Now that you're my wife," he said with that smile that no longer seemed so kind, "I want you to be even more beautiful. Dye your hair for me, my love. You'll be perfect." I hesitated, but he insisted so much, so lovingly, that I finally gave in. I spent the night in the hotel bathroom applying that dye. When I came out, platinum blonde, he hugged me too tight, almost hurting me, and whispered in my ear, "You have her soul, Evelyn. Just needed some adjustments to be perfect." I didn't understand. I asked what he meant. He just smiled and said, "Behavioral adjustments, dear, to be the ideal wife." But there was something in that smile, something that made me feel I had made the biggest mistake of my life. The first months of marriage were like living in a dream that slowly turns into a nightmare, but so gradually that you don't realize when you started being afraid. I now lived in that huge mansion, full of silent rooms and antique furniture. The house smelled of mothballs and expensive perfume. a smell that nauseated me, but I had to pretend I liked. Harold had a very specific routine. He woke up at 6 in the morning, had coffee alone reading the newspaper. I couldn't sit with him at this time. He said he needed morning concentration. Then he'd go to the clinic and only return late afternoon. When he arrived, he'd call me to the living room, make me sit in a specific armchair, the one under Claire's portrait, and stare at me in silence for minutes. "I'm studying you," he'd say. "Every detail." He started controlling everything. My clothes, my hair, my makeup. Every morning he'd pick out what I should wear. Always those old-fashioned dresses, always in pastel tones, always with those heavy jewels that had been Claire's. "Wear her pearl necklace," he'd order. "Wear the emerald earrings. They were her favorites." When I complained that the style didn't suit me, he'd get cold, distant. "You promised to be my perfect wife, Evelyn. That means trusting my judgment." Gradually, he isolated me. When Eunice called me, he'd stand next to me listening to the whole conversation, arms crossed. Then he'd say, "She's not good company for you. Talks too much, influences you badly." He forbade my visits to the farm. "Your family is too simple. You're on another level now. You don't need that anymore." I'd cry in secret, missing my mother, my siblings, my life from before. He made me talk like Claire talked. He even had cassette tape recordings of her voice, which he'd play while correcting me. "Softer, Evelyn." She had a sweeter voice. "Try again." I felt like a doll being molded, an actress memorizing a role that wasn't mine. At night, he'd tell me stories about Claire. How they met, the places they frequented, the things she liked. "She loved white roses," he'd say, and the next day he'd fill the house with white roses, even though I was allergic and sneezed all day. "She played piano," he'd say, and forced me to have piano lessons with a teacher who came to the house twice a week, even though I had no talent for music. One day, about 6 months after the wedding, I was looking at myself in the bedroom mirror. I looked at my reflection, platinum blonde with those old clothes, that heavy makeup he made me wear, and I didn't recognize myself. I started crying. Harold walked into the room at that moment and hugged me from behind, looking at our reflection in the mirror. "Almost perfect," he whispered. "Just a little bit more." I asked with a trembling voice. "A little bit more of what?" He smiled in a way that made me freeze. "Patience, my love. Soon you'll understand." I started having anxiety attacks. My heart would race out of nowhere. I couldn't breathe, got dizzy. Harold, as a doctor, always had an explanation. "It's stress," he'd say. "It's adjustment to marriage." He gave me tranquilizers that left me sluggish, drowsy. I lived in a fog, without energy to react, to question. It was on one of those nights that everything happened. I had just finished dinner. We always dined in silence. He didn't like conversation during meals. After dinner, I went to the living room to read a book, but I started feeling a terrible headache, one of those that feels like your head's going to explode. I complained to him. "Oh, my love," he said in that overly smooth voice, that voice that now gave me shivers. "You're so tense. I'll make you a special tea and a little pill that will make that pain go away quickly." He came back from the kitchen with a steaming cup and a pill. "Take it, dear. Trust me. I'm a doctor. I know what's best for you." I was in so much pain that I didn't question it. I drank the tea, swallowed the pill. The taste was bitter, strange, but he said it was normal. "Lie down on the couch and relax. It'll pass soon." I lay down. And gradually, everything started getting blurry. My tongue got heavy. My eyelids started closing on their own. I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out right. I tried to get up, but my body wouldn't obey. The last thing I remember is his voice whispering near my ear. "Finally, my love. Finally, I'll be able to make you perfect. You'll wake up being who you really should be." And then everything went black. When I started coming to, I don't know how much time had passed. Days, weeks, everything was confused, foggy. I was in a bed, but it wasn't my bed. The smell was of hospital, that smell of alcohol and medicine that sticks in your nose. I tried to open my eyes, but it hurt. Everything hurt. My entire face throbbed, burned, like I'd been beaten. I tried to lift my hand to touch my face, but my arms were weak, heavy, and there were needles in both arms with tubes connected to IVs. I managed to moan, and I immediately heard footsteps. It was him. Harold. He came running to me, with that smile on his face, but a sick smile, of someone seeing something wonderful. "You woke up." "Thank God, my love. I was so worried." I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't move right. Everything was bandaged, only my eyes were exposed. I managed to make a sound, a questioning moan. He held my hand. "You fell down the stairs, dear. Don't you remember? It was a terrible accident. Your face was very damaged. But don't worry one bit. I took care of everything. I'm the best plastic surgeon in the region, remember? I reconstructed your face. Did perfect work. You'll be even more beautiful than before." I tried to shake my head, tried to say no, that I hadn't fallen down any stairs, that he had drugged me, but I couldn't. I could only lie there, feeling that unbearable pain, feeling tears run from my eyes to the pillow. He visited me every day, brought flowers, always white roses, talked to me like I was a child, explaining how my recovery was going, how the dressings were changed, how the healing was perfect, absolutely perfect. I was trapped. Alone in that private room at his clinic, unable to speak, unable to move properly. The nurses were his, obeyed only him. Nobody questioned anything. Weeks passed. The pain gradually diminished, but the mental agony only increased. I knew something was terribly wrong. He had done something to me, and I was terrified to find out what. Every time I tried to ask, touch the bandages, he'd hold my hand tightly and say, "Calm down, dear. Soon you'll see. You'll be so happy. Finally, we'll be the perfect couple we always should have been." The day to remove the bandages was coming, and I felt, deep in my soul, that when those wrappings came off, I was going to discover something that would destroy me inside, something that could never be undone. The day arrived. 3 weeks and 2 days after I woke up in that room, Harold walked in with a smile like a child on Christmas morning. He was excited in a way that made me nauseous. "Today's the day, my love. Today you'll finally see yourself. You'll see the gift I gave you." I was sitting in the chair next to the bed, wearing a white hospital gown that was too big for me. My body had gotten thin in those weeks. I hardly ate, had no appetite, just that constant lump in my throat. My heart started beating so hard, I thought I'd faint. He approached with surgical scissors and started cutting the bandages, slowly, carefully, like someone opening a precious gift. With each layer that came off, I felt the cold air touch my skin for the first time in weeks. The skin was sensitive, pulling, strange. When the last bandage fell, he took a step back to look at me better. His eyes started shining, filled with tears. "Perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect." I slowly raised my hand and touched my face. The texture was different. The shape was different. Everything was different. I want to see," I managed to say, my voice coming out hoarse from so long without use. "Of course, my love, of course you want to see." He ran out and came back with a hand mirror, one of those with a gold handle, antique. The same mirror that was on Claire's vanity, I had seen it stored in a closet in the house. He held the mirror in front of my face, and I looked. For a moment, my brain didn't process what I was seeing. It was like I was looking at a photo of someone else. The nose wasn't my nose. It was smaller, more upturned, with a different curve. The cheekbones were higher, more prominent. The chin was different, more pointed. The eyes. My God, the eyes. He had done something to my eyes, somehow had pulled the corners, made them more almond-shaped. And then I understood. My gaze went straight to the giant painting on the wall of that room, too. because he had put a portrait of Claire even there. I looked at the painting, looked at the mirror. Painting, mirror, Claire, me, Claire, me. The same face, exactly the same face. The scream that came out of me was from a place I didn't know existed inside me. A scream of a wounded animal, of pure desperation. I threw the mirror on the floor, where it shattered into 1,000 pieces, and brought my hands to my face, scratching, trying to tear off that skin that wasn't mine, that face that wasn't mine. "No! No! What did you do to me? What did you do?" I screamed, cried, thrashed. Harold tried to hold me, but I pushed him with a strength I didn't know I had. I fell on the floor among the glass shards, bleeding, but didn't even feel the pain. The pain in my body was nothing compared to the pain of my soul being torn apart. He knelt beside me, trying to hug me, trying to calm me. "Shh, my love, calm down. You're in shock, it's normal. But look how beautiful you are. Look how perfect you are now. Finally, you are who you always should have been." I pulled away from him, crawling on the floor. "I'm not her. I'm not Claire. I'm Evelyn. I am Evelyn." My voice was hoarse from screaming. He stood up, looking at me with that frightening expression, almost as if he didn't really hear me. "You are who I need you to be," he said with cold calm. "You are my masterpiece, my gift from God." Claire came back to me, finally came back. In that moment, I understood the complete truth, the truth my friend Eunice had tried to warn me about. He didn't love me. He never loved me. He just wanted a body, a living shell to put the face of the dead woman on. I was just a piece of meat to be molded, sculpted, transformed. I wasn't a person to him. I was a project, a flesh and blood doll. The nurses came running at the noise. Harold ordered them to hold me, to give me a sedative. "She's having a post-surgical crisis," he explained in that professional voice of his. "It's normal. It'll pass." They held me while he applied the injection. I tried to fight, but I was too weak. I felt the liquid burning in my vein, and gradually everything got slow, heavy, distant. Before I blacked out, I looked into his eyes one last time, and I saw there wasn't a spark of humanity there, only obsession, only madness. When I woke up again, I was back at the mansion in our bed. I don't know how much time had passed. Could be hours, could be days. I was wearing one of Claire's dresses. My hair was styled like hers in the photo. Even the makeup was the same. He had dressed me while I slept like I was a doll. I got up slowly and went to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror again, this time more calmly, letting reality sink in. That was my face now, forever. He had stolen my identity, had erased who I was. Evelyn, the farm girl, Oliver and Grace's daughter, had disappeared. In her place was a copy of a dead woman. I sat on the cold bathroom floor and cried until I had no more tears. Cried for my lost life, for my family I didn't see anymore, for my freedom that had been stolen. Cried for the naivety of believing in a man who only saw me as an object to be transformed. But then, in the middle of that crying, something changed inside me. The sadness started turning into anger. A cold, calculated, dangerous anger. He had transformed me into something I wasn't. Very well. Then I was going to use this transformation against him. He wanted a Claire? Then he'd have a Claire. But not the sweet and submissive Claire he remembered. He'd have a vengeful Claire, a Claire who would make him pay for every second of suffering he caused me. I dried my tears. I looked at my reflection, that strange face, those eyes that weren't mine, and made a promise to the farm girl who still lived somewhere inside. "I'm going to get us out of here. I'm going to get justice. He's going to pay." I got up, fixed my hair, touched up my makeup. When I came out of the bathroom, Harold was in the room waiting for me. "Are you better, my love?" I forced a smile. A sweet, gentle smile. Claire's smile. I am, dear. Sorry for the crisis. You're right. I was just in shock. But now I understand. Now I see the gift you gave me. His eyes shone with sick happiness. He hugged me tight. I knew you'd understand. I knew it. I returned the hug, but inside I was planning every detail of my revenge. He had created a monster, and that monster was going to destroy him. The following months were the hardest of my life, my dears, but they were also the ones that taught me we're stronger than we imagine when we have nothing left to lose. I pretended. I pretended so well I deserved an acting award. Every day I woke up and put on the mask, not just the mask of the face he gave me, but the mask of the perfect wife, the resurrected Claire he so wanted. I started studying everything about Claire. I'd ask him to tell me stories about her, looked at old photo albums, read her diary that he kept in a locked drawer. I found the key hidden. I learned every detail of her life, every habit, every preference. When he came home, I was sitting playing piano, even though my fingers hurt from practicing so much. I smiled the way she smiled in photos. I walked the way he said she walked. I became the shadow of a dead woman. Harold was radiant. He thought he had succeeded, that his sick experiment had worked. He let his guard down, stopped watching me so much, stopped locking doors, started leaving me alone at home when he went to the clinic. You're perfect now, my love, he'd say every day. Finally, I have my Claire back. I used that time alone to plan. I searched the entire house. I discovered he had an office in the back, locked, where he kept his surgical equipment. He liked to clean them at home, said the clinic staff didn't do it right. I found the key to that office too. He hid it in a plant pot in the living room. Smart men always think they're too clever to be discovered. I went into that office several times while he was gone. It was a frightening place. There were scalpels of all sizes, surgical scissors, forceps, needles, suture thread. There were also bottles of medications, anesthetics, sedatives, and there were photos. Dozens of photos of Claire spread across the desk, on the wall. And next to them, photos of me, before and after. He had documented the entire transformation with clinical photos. There was even a notebook where he wrote, detailing every procedure he had done on me, every cut, every change. Reading that was like being stabbed, but I needed to read. I needed to know exactly what he had done to me. I also discovered another terrible thing. At the back of a drawer, there was an old police report about Claire's death. She hadn't died in a car accident like he said. She had died at home, of unknown causes, but the report indicated suspected poisoning. The investigation was closed for lack of evidence, but it was clear he had been the main suspect. Claire had tried to leave him, had discovered he was obsessed, controlling, dangerous, and he didn't let her leave. If he couldn't have her alive, he'd keep her dead forever, through someone else, through me. In that moment, holding that report in my hands, I understood I wasn't just fighting for my freedom. I was fighting for the justice Claire never got. I was fighting for all the women that monster could victimize in the future. I had to stop him, in a way that he could never hurt anyone again. I started stealing small doses of his medications. Drops of sedative here, a little anesthetic there. He didn't even notice. He had so much stock. I kept everything hidden in my underwear drawer, at the back, wrapped in a handkerchief. I studied the dosages in his pharmacology book. I needed to know exactly how much to use for him to be unconscious, but not die. No, death was too little for him. Death would be too easy. 3 months after the surgery, the anniversary of Claire's death arrived. Harold was melancholic all day. At night, he opened a bottle of expensive wine, that special wine he'd kept since she was alive. "Let's toast," he said, "to new beginnings, to my beloved's return." I toasted with him. I took a sip from my glass, pretended to drink more than I did. He, however, drank for real. Glass after glass. The more he drank, the more he talked. He told me how he had planned my transformation from the first day he saw me. "When you walked into that clinic, I knew right away," he confessed, drunk. "You had the perfect bone structure, the right height, the right age. It was like God had sent you to me. I just needed to adjust the details." Hearing that made me nauseous, but I kept smiling. "You're a genius," I said, running my hand through his hair. "An artist." He smiled, proud. Drank more. When his speech started slurring, I suggested, "Let's go to your office. You can show me your instruments, explain how you did each part of the procedure." His eyes lit up. He loved talking about his work. We went to the office. He sat in the big leather chair and started explaining to me, picking up each instrument, each scalpel, demonstrating in the air how he had cut, how he had sewn. He was so engrossed, so drunk, so confident that he didn't notice when I positioned myself behind him. I took his glass, which was half full, and while he gestured excitedly, I poured the contents of the vials I had collected for months. I stirred discreetly with my finger. "One more toast," I said, handing the glass back to him. "To the best surgeon in the world." He drank it all at once. A few minutes later, he started blinking slowly. I'm feeling strange." His head fell forward. His arms went limp. He was unconscious. Not dead, I had calculated exactly, but deeply sedated. He wouldn't wake up for the next 8 hours. I took a deep breath. This was it. There was no turning back. I took his instruments, the same instruments he used on me. I also took the phenol acid he used for deep chemical peels, an acid so strong it burns down to the dermis, leaving permanent scars. I looked at him, passed out there, so vulnerable, so at my mercy, just like he left me, just like he made me. I felt the rage rise in my throat. "You stole my face," I whispered. "Now I'm going to mark yours, so everyone knows what kind of monster you are." I began the work. With the finest scalpel, I started writing on his forehead, pressing deep into the skin. It had to be deep enough for the scar to last forever. The word, murderer. Letter by letter, with steady hands even though trembling inside. Then, on the left cheek, thief. On the right, of souls. He moaned softly during the procedure but didn't wake up. The sedative was potent. Finally, the acid. I took the bottle, soaked a piece of gauze, and applied it to his eyelids, carefully. The tissue started burning, turning red, blisters forming. Those hands of his, those eyes of his, were the monster's tools. Without them, he could never do another surgery, could never see the beauty he so idolized, could never transform another woman into a ghost. When I finished, I washed my hands, cleaned the instruments, put everything back in place. I took photos of him with the camera he himself used to document procedures. I took the notebook where he had written about my surgery, the report about Claire's death, and kept everything in a folder. Then, with hands still trembling, I called the police. "Hello? I need help. My husband. He tried to drug me again, tried to do another forced surgery on me. I defended myself. He's hurt. Please come quickly." When the police arrived, they found the scene. Him still unconscious in the chair, with the words written on his face and burned eyelids. Me in the living room, crying, with the documents in hand. I showed them his diary. I showed them the suspicious death report of Claire. I showed them the before and after photos of my forced transformation. I told them everything. The police were horrified. They called an ambulance for him, but also called backup. Because it was clear this wasn't a common assault. It was the end of a years-long nightmare. It was justice. When the paramedics took him away, still unconscious, one of the older officers came to talk to me. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "officially, this will be investigated. But unofficially, I think you did what had to be done. Men like that are demons in white coats." That night, I slept at the police station, but I slept better than I had slept in months. Because finally I had done something. I had recovered a piece of my power. I couldn't change the face anymore, but I could change the future. And his future. His future I had destroyed with my own hands. And here I am, my dears, today at 78 years old, living right here in Cedar Falls, in the same town where it all happened, but in a completely different life. You must be wondering, Grandma Evie, what happened after? So let me tell you. The trial was long. Harold survived, but was blinded by the acid I threw. The scars from the words I wrote on his face stayed forever, very visible. He lost his medical license, could never operate on anyone again. He was convicted of aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and Claire's death case was reopened. With the evidence I found, they finally managed to get justice for her too. He got 20 years in prison. He served 17 and died there inside, of a stroke, in 1990. I didn't go to the funeral. As for me, well, it took me time to recover. I lived in a simple apartment that the police helped me get, with help from social services. I did therapy for years. Back then, people didn't talk much about therapy. But I needed it, honey. I really needed it. I learned to live with this face that isn't mine, but that became mine. I thought about doing another surgery to go back to how I was before, but the doctors said it would be too risky, that there was too much scar tissue, that it could go wrong. So I learned to accept it. I reconnected with my family. My father and mother came to get me, took me back to the farm for a while. They barely recognized me at first. They cried a lot. But a mother and father's love doesn't change because of a different face. They welcomed me, took care of me, helped me become human again. My siblings, too, each in their own way, gave me support. Teresa came to visit me every week, brought food, sat talking with me. Over time, I went back to work. First at a grocery store as a cashier, then at a school as a custodian. Honest, simple work that did me good. I met good people, made real friendships. I learned that life goes on, even after the worst nightmare. I remarried, yes, about 10 years after everything. A simple man, a widower who worked as a mechanic. His name was Arthur. He knew my whole story. I told him before we got married because I didn't want lies between us. He looked at me with those kind eyes and said, "What matters is who you are inside, Evie, and you're the bravest woman I've ever met." We lived together for 23 years until he passed from cancer in 2006. He gave me 3 beautiful children, 2 boys and a girl. They gave me 8 grandchildren who are my joy today. Today, I live in a simple little house here in Cedar Falls, not far from where I grew up. It's a small house, 2 bedrooms, with a little backyard where I plant some things. I have my herb garden, parsley, chives, basil. I have an apple tree that bears fruit every year, and I make jam to sell at the farmer's market along with the sweets. My children live nearby, come visit me every week. Marlene, my youngest, comes every Saturday to help me make sweets for the market. We stay here in the kitchen, laughing, talking, while we roll fudge and make truffles. My grandchildren stop by after school some days, eat bread with the caramel I make, tell me about their lives. This house is always full of good noise, laughter, life. I participate in the church's quilting circle every Tuesday. We're a bunch of grandmas who get together to make quilts, tablecloths, and talk about everything. They know my story. Everyone in Cedar Falls knows. Small towns don't keep secrets. But they treat me with affection, with respect. They don't see me as a victim. They see me as a survivor. Sometimes when I'm alone, I look in the mirror and it still feels strange. After all these years, I got used to this face. But there are days when I remember the girl I was, the Evie with dark hair and button nose who ran barefoot on the farm. She's still in here, you know. The face changed, but the essence didn't. I'm still Oliver and Grace's daughter. I'm still the girl who played with Precious the hen. I'm still me. Life taught me that we're much more than appearance, that we're made of the choices we make, the courage we have, the love we give and receive. Harold thought he could erase me, transform me into someone else. But he only managed to change my face. Inside, I kept being me. And that victory, my dears, that victory nobody will ever take from me. You know what I learned in these 52 years since that night? That the greatest danger doesn't come from someone who hits you. It comes from someone who erases you. From someone who takes away little pieces of you, day after day, until there's nothing left of the person you were. And you don't even notice when it started, because it comes disguised as care, as protection, as love. Some people think it's only violence when it leaves bruises on the body. But the deepest marks are the ones nobody sees. They're the ones that stay in the soul when someone convinces you that you're not enough. When they make you cut ties with those who truly love you. When they transform you into a version of someone else because you, the way you are, aren't good enough. I was a farm girl who dreamed of studying. I became a living doll representing a dead woman. And the worst part? I let it happen. I accepted the old-fashioned dresses. I dyed my hair. I pretended to be who I wasn't, because I confused obsession with passion. I confused control with protection. I confused prison with home. Today, when I look in the mirror and see this face that wasn't born with me, I think, was it worth surviving? And the answer is yes. 1,000 times yes. Because every wrinkle I got after, every gray hair, every mark of time, these are mine. They're from the life I chose to live, not from the life he wanted me to live. You who are listening to me now, pay attention. Nobody who truly loves you will want to change you. Improving together, growing together, supporting each other, that's partnership. But molding you like your bread dough, erasing your essence, isolating you from everyone, that's sickness. That's danger. And it doesn't matter how much time you've already invested in that relationship. It doesn't matter how many excuses you've already invented to explain his or her behavior. It doesn't matter if the whole family already knows, if the house is already bought, if everyone thinks you're the perfect couple. If you're not yourself anymore, leave. Now. Look for your mother, your father, your sibling, your friend, the one you abandoned because he didn't like her. Call, send a message, knock on the door. People who truly love you will welcome you back, always. And for those on the outside seeing someone changing, disappearing, erasing themselves, don't stay silent. It was Eunice who tried to warn me. I didn't listen, but she tried. Be that person. Try. Because sometimes a word of warning can save a life. Today I make my sweets, take care of my grandchildren, do my embroidery at the church group. It's a simple life. Humble, but it's my life. And that's priceless. Now listen carefully to what I'm going to ask you. If you recognize someone in this story, whether yourself or someone close, don't let this video die here. Subscribe to Grandparents' Tales now. Hit that notification bell, because these stories need to reach far. They need to reach that woman who thinks she's crazy. That man who's being isolated and controlled too. Because it happens, you know? That mother who's watching her daughter disappear little by little. And leave in the comments just 2 words, so I know you understood the message. I exist. Right there. I exist. Because that's what they try to take from us. The certainty that we exist. That we matter. That we deserve to be who we are. So go ahead now. Subscribe, share, comment where you're watching from. Hit that like button. And most importantly, take care of yourself. Value yourself. Protect yourself. Because you exist. And the world needs you whole, not a copy of anyone else.